like, well, gosh, if this is the last thing she sees, do I want to be looking at her and smiling, or do I want her to know exactly how I feel and that I'm terrified and crying?
Oh, see, can you see?
There's this purity that isn't the disease. It's the person. This isn't normal and this isn't pain-free.
I'm Becky Quick. This is The Path from CNBC Cures, a podcast series about the people, the struggles, and the science of rare disease. If you listened to or watched our first episode, thank you. Thank you so much for opening your hearts to my family and our daughter's story. She's one of the millions of Americans with a rare genetic disease. Kaylee's disease is called SYNGAP1. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder that causes conditions like autism and intellectual disability. People with SYNGAP often have difficulty communicating, and there is no cure, at least right now.
Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me.
Deciding whether to share Kaylee's story was something that my husband Matt and I struggled with for years.
Why, you don't want to go?
Well, Kaylee and I go to our wrestle now.
We are both very private people, and we are especially protective of Kaylee. And not being able to ask her consent on this project made us second-guess ourselves for a long time. But the outreach and response has been incredible. It's beyond anything either of us has ever experienced. We've received thousands of emails, texts, and calls, and your comments on YouTube and across social media. Many of you shared your stories about children like Kaylee, or about people you love who are walking this path of rare disease. Please, let's keep this conversation going. We've set up a new email address. It's cnbc.cures@cnbc.com. You can email us to share your story or to learn more about the CNBC Cures initiative. But the response has been overwhelming and gratifying. I called this series The Path for a few reasons. Rare and the life around it is not one and done. Like my daughter's therapies that are very targeted, it's repetition, reinvention, recommitment, again and again and again. Today's story is about two heroes who have done just that, and they have offered hope brought by courage, by pioneering science, and by astonishing bravery. Luke Rosen is a hero to me. He is such a good friend, and in another life, he played heroes on television. He also happens to be a real-life firefighter in New York. I first met Luke Rosen a couple of weeks into my daughter's SYNGAP1 diagnosis, and he was wonderful. He answered my questions patiently, thoughtfully. He gave me hope. Wait, we good? Okay.
My name is Luke Rosen, and before anything, I'm Susannah's dad. And I have an incredible family. And my wife, Sally, and I started a foundation called KIF1A.org.
First of all, tell me about yourself.
I was born in New York. My mom's a Boston Irish. My dad was Brooklyn Jew through and through. And it was doomed from the beginning. Sally and I met in college. So we've been together for about 20 years, and we've been married for 10. We were living on the Upper West Side in Manhattan, and I had, at that point, had a pretty, thriving career as an actor in New York and a writer.
The Bureau will need a full review of your hiring practices.
That's necessary?
The deceased officer had 4 different social security numbers attributed to his name. And Sally works with a wonderful chef. And so we had a really great thing going. We had a really good normal, right? We had our first child, Nat. He was incredible. And then 3 years later, that's when we had Susannah, and that's when our world changed.
Tell me about when you first realized there was something different, something that was going on.
We realized something different was going on with Susannah in the bathtub. Sally has this incredible way of, when the kids are in the bath, she sings this little song like kick, 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 right? And then when Susannah got in the bath, we started going in there to sing the kick song, and she couldn't kick her legs. After we found out that she couldn't kick, we went to the hospital, and we sought pretty urgent care about it.
How old was Susannah?
She was 2.5.
But she was walking already.
And she was couch surfing.
Okay.
And she was army crawling.
Yeah.
But she was walking with assistance, but we knew she had a very ataxic gait. She didn't have great balance. And then the more we learned about the disease, we knew that that walking and that ability to ambulate would probably not be in her future.
What is KIF1A?
KIF1A is a molecular motor protein that is really vital for brain function, and especially neuronal growth and neuronal health, the health of your neurons. And it's a really important gene and a really important protein for all of us. We all have a KIF1A gene, and Susannah has a mutation in her KIF1A gene that it's called a toxic gain of function mutation. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, gain of function, that's good. That's not good. And so the function that gene gains is giving off this really toxic element of protein that slowly kills the nerves in her brain and kills the nerves in her whole body. Yeah.
How has that journey kind of progressed from the time when she was 2.5 years old and you rushed her to the hospital?
Yeah, the journey's it's a different answer every day, right? I mean, the journey's progressed physically and medically, and the journey's progressed emotionally. You find your tribe quickly, like you and I, you find somebody else who's feeling as isolated as you are. We watch our kids, slowly lose the ability to walk, to talk, she has several seizures a day. But in the midst of all of these challenges, we're also fighting for treatment, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't exist, and it didn't exist.
And so you took on this kind of incredible path to go out there, create the foundation, and try and find out what you could possibly do. How did you start it? How did you even know where to begin?
Someone told us, she's an incredible physician who you may know, Wendy Chung, and Wendy was the first person to tell us about the disease and first person to see Susannah and really give us the diagnosis.
It is just incredibly hard to be a parent in this situation. It feels sometimes like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. KIF1A has no treatment. It has no treatment, it has no cure, it has nothing other than symptomatic relief right now, and we know that left to its own devices, it will kill our children.
Wendy said this is very articulate and very empathetically told us that, we don't know much about the disease. Susannah probably won't walk. Susannah will probably have a lot of seizures. She probably will be in a wheelchair, and we don't know much about the lifespan of your daughter. So there were a lot of tears in that room, and Sally and I just kind of sat there. And I've said this before, but in my head, I kept saying to myself, how am I going to tell Nat? Like, how am I going to tell
her older brother?
How am I going to tell her older brother that all of this? Like, how do I do that? And Wendy looked right at me in the eyes, and she said, he is going to grow up to be a remarkable young man. And he is, but he's remarkable in a way that nobody should have to be, So that was the beginning of our incredibly new and terrifying normal.
Thank you, Dr. John Class.
There you go.
When we got Susannah's diagnosis, I got the call from the doctor to go over and get the paper or get the actual diagnosis. And that's when I'm reading this paper, or I'm reading this horrific publication about brain atrophy, about death, about what is about to happen. And I came home to tell Sally, and I opened looked in our kitchen, and her back was to me, getting something out of the refrigerator, and she didn't see me. And I thought in my head, maybe I could give Sally another maybe if I go out and just get a coffee or something, I could give her 2 minutes without knowing this, without knowing that our daughter is really sick, and without knowing that our lives have completely changed. Can I just give her that 2 minutes of not knowing what she's about to find out? I just stood there for an extra minute and looked at her until she turned around. And that's when I said, look, this is, we have a really sick kid, and it was terrifying, and we haven't cried like that. Then it brings you closer, or it splinters you. And I'm thankful that it brought us closer, because I don't know, I wouldn't be anything without her.
I mean, that extra, the idea that you thought of giving her that extra few minutes of the last piece you're ever going to have in your life.
Yeah, because it is. I mean, imagine if we could just have another
Ignorant day.
ignorant day. Instead, we have to become smart in ways that we never thought we had to be.
Yeah.
Another ignorant day. I wish I had a few more of those.
Let it shine, let it shine. Put it on my eyebrow.
I mean, I don't want people to not realize that Susannah has real spark. I mean, she's pretty amazing too.
Yes.
She's got all these things she's dealing with, but she's funny.
She's funny. She is funny. The other day when we find ourselves in the emergency room a lot for random reasons. We were in the emergency room and our doctor was not there. So we find ourselves, and I think you might know this very well too, is you're educating the medical community too. And so I could tell the doctor, we'll be right back. And I knew they were going to Google it, right? And
What is CYF1A?
yeah. And so, but Susannah, they were coming in, and Susannah saw the cart that has the vital stuff on it, the cuff for the blood pressure and all that stuff. And she just went like this. She put out her arm and put out her hand and was like, pulse ox, and if you're taking blood, just do it.
The other hero in this story is Dr. Stanley Crooke. He is the founder of Ionis Pharmaceuticals.
Hello, everybody. I'm Stan.
He's even appeared on CNBC as a biotech leader, like he did on this hit.
Get about 220 million if it's an Antisense drug in pre-commercial milestones,
Okay. All right,
and
Doctor.
90 million pre-commercial milestones if it's a different modality. So it's, in the end, it's focused on the patient, and I think the patients will be the big winners.
All right, good luck. We appreciate it, Doctor, and Biogen IDEC, quite a partner to have. And did you hear all that
They're
gobbledygook?
wonderful. They're a wonderful group.
Yeah, they are. But Carl Icahn, how did he know about Biogen? How does he?
gut.
You think he
The
knew
gut.
all that?
Invested
You
in
think he
gut.
knew about Antisense technology at Biogen IDEC?
He had a gut on this.
But it's the work he's doing now, a pioneering technique of turning short synthetic strands of genetic code, DNA or RNA, into medicine that will be his legacy.
Hi, I'm Stan Crooke. I founded and am chairman and CEO of n-Lorem, a nonprofit foundation doing its best to help extremely rare patients, patients with extremely rare diseases. Before that, I was founder, chairman, CEO, and lead scientist at a company called Ionis that created Antisense technology, the technology we use at n-Lorem. Yeah, well, I think rare disease, the definition of rare disease is changing as we sequence more humans. And rare disease was defined by the FDA as a population of 200,000 or less patients with a particular disease. But we now know that there are many, many pathogenic mutations that produce disease in far fewer patients. We at n-Lorem are focused on a particular slice of the population called nano-rare, and our focus is on these patients because they have no hope. There is no solution for them other than what we can offer. And one of the reasons that they have no hope and no solution is that they're so rare. A nano-rare mutation is a pathogenic mutation with a known prevalence of less than 30 humans in the world. If you can imagine the isolation and the desperation and the lack of information that's available when you're one of 30 or one of 10 patients in the whole world. And these patients have always existed, but they got lumped into other diseases, and we know them now because we're sequencing human beings and identifying this very, very rare spectrum of genetic diseases.
How did you get involved in nano-rare? What led you to that point?
Well, at the time I was running Ionis, which is the company I founded, and I was visited by two sets of parents, both of whom had boys with mutations in a gene called SCN2A. There are a lot of gene names, but it encodes a sodium channel, and we are electrical machines, and we function because we can move electrical charges around, and those are called ions. And so the SCN2A codes for a protein that moves sodium ions across membranes. And as a consequence, these boys just had horrible syndromes. If you can imagine your child seizing all day, every day, and having movement disorders, ballistic movement disorders that you can't control, autonomic dysfunction, inability to control breathing, heart rate. I mean, it's just a terrible disease. And they were there to see if we could help them, and I had to tell them that the indication was just too small for Ionis to pursue commercially. But in that conversation, I realized that the technology that we had invented was efficient enough that I could make a drug for one of those boys and give it to them. Just give it to them. And that stayed with me.
Was that kind of like a lightning moment for you?
It was a gravitational moment. And I realized that I had led the creation of this technology that could in principle do this. And there were patients like these boys in need. And I kept looking at the space, and the more I looked, the more desperate it looked, and the worse the conditions became. And the more it became very clear that it's something that I was equipped to try to deal with. And so in 2020, when I retired from Ionis, I founded n-Lorem.
It's got a lousy name, Antisense technology.
Well, yeah, I didn't make that up. But so, your genes are read left to right. And that makes sense. And you have a second strand of DNA that's the opposite direction. That's called an antisense strand. And so the idea of antisense technology was to take advantage of the genetic code directly and create little, instead of many nucleotides, little oligo, a few of these genetic letters that would then use the genetic information directly to bind to a specific target in RNA. And that direction that the ASO is designed for is the antisense direction. And so it made sense to call it antisense oligonucleotides from a scientific perspective. Right. But as people have told me for about 40 years now, bad branding.
Antisense oligonucleotide. I know, it's a mouthful, but an ASO therapy is a way to correct disease-causing protein levels in patients. Sometimes your body produces too much of a protein. Sometimes it's not enough. In my daughter Kaylee's case, her brain's not producing enough SYNGAP protein. If there was a way to convince her body to boost the production of that SYNGAP protein through a therapeutic injection, let's say, we have real reason to believe that with the proper levels, her brain could develop more fully. It could make the synapses fire properly, build stronger connections, and that would help her in many, many ways. It's promising. It's not a permanent solution.
So I went to different conferences, Global Genes, and some other, opportunities where there were lots of rare disease families together. And then I honed in on those two groups, Huntington's disease and SMA. And both of those diseases were being treated with an antisense oligonucleotide, or an ASO. And I went to one company and I said, can you make an ASO for Susannah, kids like her? And the answer at first was too rare, sorry. Sickening to say the word market size in the same sentence as our kids' horrific degenerative disease, right? You're certainly not thinking about a market size, and I was so mad. But then I realized that, okay, what Wendy was telling me to do was to find out what their mission, what their approach was, what their strategy was. And then that's what we started doing. And I recall banging down Stan Crooke's door and just calling until he got back to me. And that's one of the first times that I felt a lot of hope. And this like isolation on that island of rare disease that we're on, I felt other people coming onto it and saying, hey, do you need a raft to get off this island?
What were the next steps? How long did it take from the time she was accepted to the program to the point where she actually received her first ASO therapy?
2 years, maybe a little bit over. And now I know they've significantly decreased that time, but Susannah was, I think, the second person. So it was really just sorting out things. I remember being in the endoscopy suite when she finally did get dosed. I think we were in the OR at that point. And some of the people in that room, I was in there, and some of the people in that room, I looked and they were like, let's hope this works.
And you watched them, I guess, start to inject it. Was it IV or was it?
So we had to leave after. So we went in, she was anesthetized. And by the way, people didn't tell us that when your child is being anesthetized, sometimes they shake a lot. And so the first time Susannah had anesthesia, it wasn't for this, it was for another time. It was isn't it so hard when your child is going under and you're there and you think, well, gosh, if this is the last thing she sees, like, how do I want to look for her? Do I want to be looking at her and smiling, or do I want her to know exactly how I feel and that I'm terrified and crying? And so she closed her eyes and fell asleep, and I kissed her on her forehead, and Sally kissed her, and we left, and we just waited. And it was really but I kept thinking about that. What if this is the last time she sees me as she was falling asleep? And that was, how do you want your child to remember you? Because if I was being honest with her at that moment, and probably most of her life, the answer was terrified and helpless. And, that's not what you want your children to think of you, but that's how I feel with these diseases.
So what did you do? Did you smile?
I did, and I lied to her I forced a smile. Well, I mean, it was the first time we left the hospital feeling good instead of leaving with this catastrophic news that something else had happened. But, just forcing that smile, because imagine how scared she was.
Right. No, I've done the same thing.
You've done the same thing. Do you smile? I don't know what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want them to feel worse than they already do.
Or as scared as we are.
Yeah.
Or does she even understand that? I don't know.
Well, I know for sure Kaylee feels my anxiety levels and my fear factor. So anything I can do to shut that down.
Look at you go.
I think that's wonderful.
All by yourself.
Nat looked at me and said, is this medicine going to help Susannah think differently? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, is it going to help her like play with other kids? Is it going to, I don't know. And that notion, it hit me pretty hard that, no, she's probably not going to read. You know, she's probably not going to do these things that we all take so for granted. And, you know, Sally said the other day, just, I wish she could just read a sentence, you know, if she just read something, and that's because, you know, that would be remarkable, but it's just not in the cards.
I used to wish all the time, think if she could just have a friend.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can tell that they want a friend. Susannah wants a friend. She can't have a sleepover.
You want to roar?
People don't quite understand what intellectual disability is, and it's so severe for kids like ours. And she can't confide in somebody because she doesn't know what that means, and she can't, she'll hug somebody.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe there's a physical, but people don't necessarily know how to react to that.
Yeah.
And I knew my son was really in tune and an empath when he started describing people who are in wheelchairs of just getting around differently.
Yeah.
Because you can tell that there's this purity that kids have that goes away. It's fleeting, right? But he's so committed to his sister and to normalizing what's not normal. But it's kind of it's an endeavor that's going to be really hard. This isn't normal and this isn't pain-free.
Hat put on. And then I got a Pez. What flavor? Strawberry.
And what did you see after the second dose?
It was breakfast. So this, you'll understand this. Our breakfast together as a family is insane. I mean, it's, you know, things are getting thrown. Susannah's very she has a lot of tremors. And so she was, you know, people are spilling things, and my son is getting anxious because all this is happening. He has to go to school, and we're cleaning up everything, and it's never a peaceful breakfast. But one morning after she had received treatment, we were sitting at breakfast, and I was like, something is wrong. Like, what is wrong? Something's horribly wrong. But it wasn't. It was the fact that it was quiet, and we were able to like look at each other, and she held up her tremor was gone. So the treatment, and it has since, she no longer has a tremor. And now that's not an FDA approved outcome measure, right? Or an endpoint, but it is something that just means the world to us because we can have that time together. And still to this day, we can have that time together. And she still has her challenges and problems, but just that tremor going away where we can have breakfast together, that's when I knew that the drug was working.
Oh my goodness.
See?
Look at that.
Get up. You know.
Oh!
You. Okay.
What other signs point to that? What other signs tell you? Because you're right. This idea of trying to put up a clinical trial where you say, these are our endpoints, this is what we have to meet. It's really hard to sometimes get to those measurable outcomes, scientifically measurable outcomes, even though you know as a parent that there's progress taking place.
Yeah, and we made mistakes with that trial, just one mistake, and that was one of the tools they were using to measure her ambulation. Is something called the 6-minute walk test. Right? You walk for 6 minutes around these cones, but one thing that this treatment wasn't targeting, wasn't affecting, is Susan, the disease does, you know, she was losing her ability to walk slowly. And right now she's fully in a wheelchair. So that measure is totally moot. It doesn't matter to us because we're not going to force her out of her wheelchair and try to get her to walk, right? Her fuel tank was on empty every day at 2 p.m.
Yeah.
And she would be writhing in pain because she had this, and that's the hardest part, is she has this horrible peripheral neuropathy. And so she was writhing in pain, and in her own way, she would wake up and say, my feet are burning on the inside. And it was the pain, seeing your daughter in pain, is just, but her peripheral neuropathy started going away. So those painful mornings were gone. If you can eliminate pain, like God, that's it, I don't have to see her in pain anymore. And she would come home from school she'd barely make it through a couple of hours of school, and then she would just be in bed because she was having seizures all night in her sleep and wasn't getting the right sleep. And so that went away. She was more energetic and focused, and slowly could make it through an entire day of school. So she wasn't in pain, or as much pain. She was making it through school. Breakfast wasn't such a catastrophe. And she was able to sit through a baseball game and sing songs and we are so fortunate that our daughter, out of all of the challenges she has, that she can express herself in ways that I know others can't. And I never take that for granted, because that is one thing that is just, we look at it, and this is something that Dr. Chung had told me too, when I said, how should we look at this? Like, what is statistics? How should we look at this? And she said it's like a highway with 5 lanes on it. And those lanes are, cognition, fine motor, gross motor, all these different, sight. Susannah's losing her vision right now, which is really hard. And you need to focus on just a few of those lanes, because for you, those lanes are going to start falling off the highway. Yeah. And so we had somebody say, we were able to decide, well, let's focus on communication, and let's focus on maybe cognition, or you didn't know what to expect. Losing sight is really hard, because how do you give somebody, and this is, how do you give a kid the ability to, see what we can see out the window, and then within a year,
Take it away.
you take it away. It's not fair. It's not.
Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
So is the ASO therapy working?
Yes, it's also clear to us that her disease is progressing so much that it would possibly, her body's been through so much. And so when a younger kid was able to get the ASO, and we met her, incredible, she was 2, and I thought, I think she might be okay, like this, but Susannah's body, it's hard, but those little things at this are huge impact, And so, yes, the ASO is working. And I know we're still looking for the next thing, because it's just, working is a hard thing to say. Is it working? It's making her life better. I mean, she's still not going to get up and run a marathon or speak in a full sentence, she does. Her speech got much better, actually. So I can say that her speech she has great, especially with song. She relates everything to song.
Yeah.
But she's still having, now she has catatonic moments. So when we thought they were seizures, right? But she was in her wheelchair, so we were just saying, oh, she'd have a drop seizure, because if she was not in her wheelchair. but now they're lasting 40 minutes and that's not a seizure. So we were trying to figure out what that is, and it turns out that it's catatonic moment or catatonic. So we're still trying to figure out these enigmatic parts of the disease, right? But yes, the treatment's working because we can have breakfast together, you know?
And a baseball game.
And a baseball game. And
That
a
is
song.
fantastic.
Yeah, she sang the national anthem. She worked on it for 8 months.
Oh, gosh.
But she sang the national anthem. We had an FDNY Toronto Fire fundraiser, and Susannah and her friends worked for 8 months with their music teacher on singing the national anthem.
Oh my gosh.
And so the kids came out, and there were a lot of fans there, and the kids were singing the national anthem in their own way. And when we looked over and saw the firefighters banging their sticks and all these people were in the stands, like celebrating these kids, it was pretty incredible.
Oh, see, can you see by the dawn daily light?
Luke, you and I were talking earlier, and one of the things that has always struck me, and I know you too, is that, you know, we're the lucky ones. We've got resources, we've got family support systems. You know, I was an older parent, so I was not young and inexperienced in trying to figure this out. Had places, you know, I was trained to be a journalist and figure things out. We've both met people along the way who are so much less fortunate, and those are the people that I would most like to help on this.
Yeah. That's really hard, to be in the position where you're privileged enough to actually seek out the right people and the right information. And there was somebody who called me and said, my daughter was just diagnosed with this disease. And I said, did you read the paper? At the time, there was one clinical paper with a horrible title. It said, mutations in KIF1A cause brain atrophy and death.
And that's the first thing you see as a parent who has just gotten a diagnosis, and the neurologist or geneticist who tells you about it has never heard of this disease.
Yeah, and he said I couldn't afford the $35 on PubMed, which is the platform where you get the actual papers. I thought, my God, everybody has the right to learn about their disease, but also, what if I didn't have that $35? Would we be able to have kind of galvanized this community, or I don't know.
So it's not very often talked about the pressure that this puts on the family and that it puts on marriages too. How do you and Sally deal with it?
We don't. It's so hard. You're right. It's so hard. I mean, you and I were talking about this, I can't remember the last time Sally and I spent the same night in a bed. Yeah. Nope. Right?
Because somebody always has to sleep with the child who needs attention in case there's a seizure in the middle of the night, in case somebody wakes up.
So it's hard to have a marriage where you're not sleeping in the same bed as your partner. That's hard. And that's just, the connection is hard. And I don't know how single parents do it.
I don't either.
But that statistic about, and I don't know where to source it. I saw it on a Global Genes fact sheet, but that statistic that 80% of marriages fail in the rare disease community. And that doesn't shock me, because it is so hard to I don't know, when we went out for a dinner, we have takeout in the hospital, and when Susannah's asleep, maybe we can, just have a moment, but it takes us a very specific skill set to put Susannah to sleep at home. Yeah. So we have to be home by 6 to do that.
Right.
It's a lot. Yeah. One of the skill sets, I think, going back to your question, is the notion that you just have to stop. If everyone in the world just stopped caring about what people thought of them, right? The world would be a better place.
Probably.
And I think I had to stop thinking about what anybody thought of me, and I had to go asked everybody for help.
One of the things I think I'm grateful for all the time is that my husband, Matt, loves Kaylee as much as I do. Yeah. Like, that is a huge blessing and a true joy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, seeing these kids so full of love, there's this purity that isn't the disease. It's the person. I hope that never goes away. You know the trajectory of disease. If she doesn't go treated, she's probably going to die. And if we can slow that down and curb that severity of disease, then maybe, wheelchair or not, maybe I'll be able to, dance with her at prom or something. And that's something you think would never, Becky, that's something you can never
put a price tag on.
Measure.
It's not.
Yeah. But.
Oh. I think you're going to get that dance.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. YouTube.
Yeah.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you, Oak. Thank you for joining me on The Path, a podcast and videocast launching with CNBC Cures, where we're trying to build a community and make walking this path feel a little less lonely. You can subscribe to the CNBC Cures newsletter. That will give you the latest news on rare disease advances, legislative and regulatory attention, or the stories of patients and families who are waging the battles of their lives. Join us in person at the upcoming inaugural CNBC Cures Summit in New York on March 3rd. Registration and details are available at cnbc.com/cures. Episodes of The Path are on YouTube, cnbc.com, and podcast platforms. Tell us what you think in the comments. We've been inundated, but we love hearing all of your stories. Please keep sharing them and let us know your questions too. Keep coming back. Thank you to our producers and the team at CNBC for their incredible work and support. They've been unbelievable, and I appreciate it more than they know. We'll see you next time.